Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Ben Cross.
And I'm Lauren Taylor.
And today we have a mission to take you on a journey into, well, frankly, one of the most fascinating, paradoxical, and honestly just weirdest success stories in modern music.
It really is.
We are diving deep into the cinematic, stadium-filling universe of the Swedish rock band Ghost. And we've got a really massive stack of sources to guide us through this today. We're talking extensive interviews with the mastermind behind it all, Tobias Forge. We have deep dive lore guides, track-by-track album breakdowns, legal documents from a pretty highly publicized 2017 lawsuit, and of course, some incredibly passionate fan analyses straight from Reddit.
Yeah, and whether you consider yourself a metal fan or, if you've never willingly listened to a heavy guitar riff in your entire life, you're going to want to stick around for this one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the story of Ghost is, it's really a masterclass in world building. It's about fiercely protecting creative control and blending totally contradictory ideas.
Right, like mixing extreme metal with pop.
Exactly. Taking the aggression of extreme metal and mashing it up with the polished, catchy hooks of 1980s pop and turning that into a massive, globally successful empire. It's basically a lesson in how to build a dedicated community by giving them a story they can actually participate in.
Now, before we jump into the deep end here, it is probably worth pointing out that Ghost is, well, very famous for their theatrical use of satanic and anti-religious imagery.
Yes, very much so.
They have songs that literally invert the Nicene Creed, which, for context, for you listening, is the foundational historical statement of mainstream Christian belief. So inverting it is a highly provocative move.
It is. And we want to provide a calm, objective disclaimer for you right here at the top.
Yeah.
In this deep dive, we are exploring these concepts purely as theatrical narrative devices. These are artistic choices and character developments found in our source material. We're unpacking the storytelling and the world building, making it clear that we are not endorsing any specific religious or anti-religious viewpoints. We are simply trying to convey the creative ideas contained in the original sources. It's all part of a grand fictional stage play.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way this whole empire started is almost hilariously accidental.
It's so random.
We have to go back to 2006. Tobias Forge was a guy with a background in very extreme, noisy, underground metal bands. Bands with names like Repugnant and Subvision.
Very heavy stuff.
Very heavy. But one day, he's just playing around with some ideas, and he intuitively writes this riff. And it just feels different from his usual stuff. So he goes to a friend's studio just to record a quick sketch.
Just laying down some basic tracks.
Right, just some bass, drums, and guitar. And that quick little sketch eventually became the song Stand By Him.
What's fascinating here is the paradoxical sound he was chasing from that very first sketch. Forge has talked openly about how his playing background was in extreme music, but he grew up digesting all the melodic pop that was on the radio in the 1980s.
The catchy stuff.
Yeah, he loved big vocal harmonies, gospel music, and album-oriented rock. Bands like Toto and Foreigner. Oh, wow. Toto and extreme metal.
Exactly. So his vision was to take that, quote, evil-esque, atmospheric, heavy music and inject it with a pristine pop vibe. And when he heard that first recording, he actually described the result as feeling revolutionary odd.
Revolutionary odd. That's a great phrase.
It was so unconventional that he had to write a few more songs just to see if the idea actually had legs.
It's a bizarre risk, though, isn't it? If you mix atmospheric, evil-sounding metal with the upbeat melodies of an 80s pop song, you really run the risk of just alienating everyone. The hardcore metalheads will hate the pop, and the mainstream pop fans will be terrified of the metal.
Right.
So how did he actually pull that off and scale it up to the point of winning Grammys? Because in one of our Loudwire sources, Forge is quoted admitting that in every band he's ever been in, he was called a dictator and a control freak who couldn't work with anyone else. Which is a massive insight into how modern music projects actually operate behind the scenes. His response to that criticism is essentially, yes, I am a dictator and a control freak, but I can work with people.
So he owns it.
He totally owns it. It brings up this fascinating structural dynamic. A lot of bands fail because they try to operate as a pure democracy, and the creative vision just gets watered down by compromises.
Right, everyone wants their idea included.
Exactly. But Forge operates Ghost more like a film director. He knows exactly what his vision is, and he ruthlessly protects it as a singular auteur. But he actively seeks out highly skilled collaborators.
Like producers and studio musicians.
Yeah, people who will push him to execute that vision at the highest possible level.
That dynamic really comes into focus when you look at the recording process for the 2022 album, Impera. They brought in heavy-hitting Swedish pop producers like Claes Ulland, and they recorded in Stockholm's Atlantis studio.
And Atlantis studio has an incredible history. He actually compares his songwriting process to writing a detective novel.
How so? Does he mean there's a mystery in the lyrics?
No, it's more about the structural engineering of the song itself. Think about it. When you write a detective novel, you don't usually start at page 1 and just see where the story goes. You start with the payoff.
The murder, the climax.
Right, the ultimate reveal. And then you work backward to meticulously plant the clues and build the tension. In Forge's case, the climax is the massive, undeniable chorus. He figures out exactly what that payoff needs to be, and then he writes the rest of the song backward.
To create the tension leading up to it.
Yes, the ultimate tension and release.
That makes a lot of sense. The scores actually highlight how he did exactly this on the track, Call Me Little Sunshine. He created these complex, highly dissonant, clashing guitar notes in the verses, specifically to build a musical problem or like a sense of anxiety.
Right.
So that when the chorus finally hits with its major chords, it feels like this massive relieving solution.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of how he manages the music, you see that same structured, highly controlled approach applied to every single instrument. Take the guitar solos. For Impera, Forge brought in Fredrik Åkesson, a virtuoso from the progressive metal band Opeth, to track the guitars. Now, Forge absolutely hates what he calls noodling.
Right, which in guitar terms basically means just playing scales up and down the neck as fast as possible to show off without actually serving the melody of the song.
Exactly. It's technical proficiency without narrative purpose. Forge directed Åkesson to approach the solos differently. He wanted complete, composed little journeys within the tracks.
A story within the song.
Yes. He was heavily inspired by the guitarist Key Marcello from the 80s band Europe. He wanted that same sense of soaring melody, a clear build-up, and most importantly, restraint.
And you can see how that restraint pays off when you look at how the fans rank the catalog. In Loudwire's ranking of every Ghost song, the #1 spot goes to Square Hammer.
Oh, what a track.
Forge explicitly wrote that song because he realized the band needed a massive, explosive opening track if they were ever going to play arenas. He was inspired by watching Ozzy Osbourne open a set at the 1989 Moscow Peace Festival on TV when he was just a kid.
He wanted that specific stadium-shaking energy.
And he engineered it perfectly.
And right behind that, at #2, is Cirrus, which is a fascinating case study in editing. Originally, Cirrus was this sprawling 9-minute instrumental track.
9 minutes.
Which, in the world of extreme metal, a sprawling 10 to 15-minute epic is pretty standard. But Forge and his collaborators realized that wasn't going to cross over, so they ruthlessly chopped it down into a highly digestible 6-minute masterclass in composition.
Even then, I mean, a 6-minute song is quite long for mainstream radio, but for them, it was a massive exercise in trimming the fat.
It was. It builds this giant crescendo, drops down to just vocals, bass, and piano, and delivers what critics call one of the most spine-chilling lines in modern metal. I can feel the thunder that's breaking in your heart.
That's a great line.
That specific structural restraint and focus on melody is exactly what won them a Grammy for the track.
But Forge's obsession with contrast doesn't stop at the music. He also knows when to just get completely weird. On the album Impera, there's a track called 20s. Forge literally asked himself, what would the thrash metal band Slayer and the hip-hop artist Missy Elliott sound like doing a song together?
That is such a wild combination.
It is. And the result is this aggressive, rhythmic, strangely pop-structured song with horns. And then you compare that to a track like Darkness at the Heart of My Love, which is their ballad. Forge has a rule: if the music sounds pretty, the lyrics have to be extra nasty.
It's that constant push and pull between the beautiful and the grotesque.
Exactly.
Which is actually the perfect bridge to the visual and narrative side of Ghost. They don't just put out albums, they unfold chapters in an ongoing theatrical universe. And at the center of this universe is a revolving door of frontmen, a lineage of anti-popes known as the Papas.
The early days gave us Papa Emeritus I, and then Papa Emeritus II, who brought a much scarier classic horror visual aesthetic. But then there was a noticeable shift with Papa Emeritus III.
Who was supposedly the younger brother of the previous two.
Right. He brought this totally different energy to the stage. He was a dandy, ditching the heavy papal robes mid-set for a snappy suit, bringing a very charismatic swagger to the live shows. It feels like this is where the band really started to pivot from pure horror into something more theatrical and entertaining.
That pivot is crucial to their mainstream success. The universe expanded significantly beyond just the active frontman. Forge slowly introduced a wild cast of supporting characters to deepen the narrative.
Like who?
Well, you have Papa Nihil, this ancient saxophone-playing spirit, who is supposedly the father of the previous Papas. He famously collapsed and was killed off on stage in Mexico. And then there was Cardinal Copia.
I see Cardinal Copia mentioned constantly in the Reddit threads. Why was his introduction such a big deal for the fan base?
Because Cardinal Copia was a massive visual and tonal shift. He didn't wear the traditional corpse paint, that ghastly, high-contrast, black and white demonic makeup that extreme Scandinavian metal bands usually wear.
Right, the black and white face paint.
Exactly. Instead, he wore a prosthetic mask that looked like a slightly creepy, realistic older man. He had a ton of sass, rode a tricycle on stage, and unlike the previous Papas, he wasn't born into royalty. He actually had to earn his way up the ranks. He eventually upgraded to Papa IV, and more recently was elevated to the title of Frater Imperator.
How do fans even keep track of all this? The sources indicate the community is deeply invested in this lore, especially with the release of their recent concert film, Right Here, Right Now.
The fan engagement on Reddit is staggering. The film wasn't just a recording of a live show, it actually advanced the storyline in major ways, and fans were dissecting every single frame.
What kind of things were they finding?
For example, the movie revealed the sudden demise of a major behind-the-scenes character, Sister Imperator, who had been pulling the strings for years. She then returned as a guiding spirit. It also dropped some massive backstory bombs, revealing that Cardinal Copia was actually raised by these two supporting characters, Mr. and Marika Saltarian.
It almost sounds like a soap opera set in a Gothic cathedral.
It really is, and they fully embrace the comedy of it, too. In a hilarious nod to the modern age, the cinematic universe recently introduced a new character named Judith, whose sole job is to be the social media manager for this ancient, mysterious clergy.
A demonic social media manager.
It's a perfect blend of high Gothic drama and modern workplace comedy.
And the storyline never stops. The sources indicate that a new frontman has already been revealed, Papa V Perpetua. He's described as a Darth Vader-esque Mecha Papa who will be fronting the band for their upcoming 2026 album, Skeleta.
The commitment to the narrative is incredible, but this raises an important question. What happens when the very real, very messy real world crashes into this carefully constructed fictional universe? Because in 2017, the veil was completely ripped away.
Here's where it gets really interesting. For years, Tobias Forge's identity was one of the worst-kept secrets in metal, but it was still officially a secret. The musicians backing him were entirely anonymous, wearing identical masks simply known as the Nameless Ghouls.
Right.
But in April 2017, 4 former Nameless Ghouls, Simon Soderbergh, Mauro Rubino, Henrik Palm, and Martin Schertstedt, filed a lawsuit against Forge in a Swedish court.
And the accusation was severe. They claimed that Forge was cheating them out of their rightful share of the profits from world tours and album releases. Their argument was that Ghost was a collaborative band and Forge was shamelessly trying to turn it into a solo project.
So how did Forge respond to that?
His response was a fascinating look at the business structure of the project. He stated that Ghost was always his singular vision, that he wrote the music, and that no legal partnership ever existed between him and the backing musicians. They were, in his view, hired contractors, not bandmates.
The most immediate real-world consequence of this lawsuit was that it forced Tobias Forge out of the shadows. The legal filings stripped away his anonymity completely. The trial dragged on, but ultimately, in October 2018, the Swedish court dismissed the case entirely.
Completely threw it out.
Yeah. The court sided with Forge's interpretation of the business arrangement, and the 4 ex-ghouls were actually ordered to pay $146,000 to cover his legal fees.
But the creative consequence of that lawsuit is perhaps even more fascinating. It directly fueled Ghost's 2018 album, Prequel. Now, on the surface, and as heavily analyzed by fans on Reddit, Prequel is a concept album about the Black Death.
The plague.
Right. It uses the medieval plague as a metaphor for societal ignorance, rotting cities, and the sheer desperation of trying to survive an apocalypse.
The Reddit fan theories dive deep into this. They point to songs like Dance Macabre, which sounds like a cheesy 80s rock anthem, But the fans highlight that the narrative is actually about two lovers deciding to just dance and celebrate the fact that they survived another day while the play destroys the world around them.
It's a very literal interpretation of the concept.
It is an incredible metaphor, but beneath that layer of medieval plague doctors and apocalyptic survival, Prequel was also a very direct, raw response to the lawsuit and the betrayal Forge felt.
The veil of the fictional universe was used to process a very real personal trauma.
You can hear it clearly in the lyrics. There's a heavy, aggressive track called Faith, which the sources point out is a direct target at the ex-schools. The lyrics literally say, "A pack of fools can take the stand."
Yeah.
It doesn't get much more direct than referencing a courtroom stand.
And then you have a track like See the Light. For a band known for its creepy, dark aesthetic, this song is a surprisingly uplifting, triumphant anthem about transcending the hatred of your enemies.
Yeah, it features this incredibly catchy, defiant line, "Every day that you feed me with hate, I grow stronger."
It's Tobias Forge taking the anxiety, the massive legal bills, the public unmasking, and transmuting all of that negative energy into highly successful, Grammy-nominated art.
He didn't let the collapse of his anonymity destroy the band. He just folded the conflict into the lore and kept expanding the empire.
Exactly. He proved that the power of Ghost wasn't just in the secret of who was behind the mask, but in the strength of the songwriting and the resilience of the creative vision.
So what does this all mean? When we take a step back and look at this massive stack of articles, interviews, court documents, and fan theories, we are looking at the evolution of a single experimental riff.
A riff that felt revolutionary odd back in 2006.
Played by a guy from the noisy underground metal scene. And over nearly 2 decades, that idea was meticulously nurtured into a multimedia empire. It happened because Tobias Forge ruthlessly protected his creative vision, embraced absolute theatrical absurdity, and managed to turn real-life betrayals into triumphant, world-conquering art.
And for you listening, there is a powerful takeaway here about the value of your own ideas. Ghost's success proves that you do not have to compromise on your unique intersections of interest.
Right, even if they seem contradictory.
Exactly. Forge's journey is a testament to planning meticulously, writing the payoff before the setup, working with collaborators who force you to raise your game, and above all, telling a story so compelling that you invite the rest of the world to play along with you.
Which leaves us with a thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If a massive, globally successful empire, one that fills arenas and creates obsessive communities, was built entirely upon a single intuitive idea that felt revolutionary odd at the time.
Right.
Let me rephrase that.
Go for it.
If an empire like that can be built on such a weird idea, what unconventional, slightly weird idea are you sitting on right now that might just need a little bit of unapologetic theatrical flair to truly come alive?
Something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.